Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm Brian Connington, joined by my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
Brian, I know we live in a society, but I feel like somebody's watching us from beyond. You know, do you know what I'm saying?
Do you feel reanimated? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Oh, this is going to be an absolute treat. So we don't do a whole ton of interviews on this podcast, but when we do, we make them count. And wouldn't you agree, John? Like,
oh yeah,
very rarely do we get a what I would call a living legend or pioneer in modern horror to hang out with us, and we absolutely have one here today. I'm excited as all hell to talk with him. When I found out we were going to be talking with him, I was like, "This is crazy." But to kind of intro this person, okay, this person, in my opinion, again, is a pioneer in modern horror. They're the producer, director, and writer of literally some of my favorite horror movies coming out of the 80s and 90s. We're talking about movies like Re-Animator, From Beyond, Society, Return of the Living Dead 3, and even Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I kid you not. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the great Brian Yuzna to the podcast. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Brian is here because he's got an awesome screening happening of two of his films, Return of the Living Dead 3 and Society. They're going to be playing on, I believe, June 7th?
I think that's right.
June 7th as part of the Shaka-Go-Go Film Festival at the Lumiere Center in Beverly Hills. And Return of the Living Dead 3 is going to be fun because our friend Anastasia Elfman is going to be doing a very special bloody burlesque type show, right?
That's what I hear.
That's what you hear. That's what you hear. Along with that, Brian's going to be there to do Q&A. And on top of that, you're also going to be having Society playing at midnight, which I got to be honest with you.
Perfect time for it.
Maybe don't eat when you go to see that film. Although, unless you're weirdos like John and I, we will have nachos and stuff watching Society because it's such a great film. Especially in current time.
I don't think it's weird to watch your sister scrub her butt in the front in the shower. You know.
So
good. It happened to all of us.
Yeah, everyone's been there. We've all been there, right? We've all been there.
But Brian, as I do this a lot with interviews, and some people either really like it or really hate it. So it'll be a barometer here. But just to kind of start things off, in case people have no idea or know only of one thing, can you tell us about yourself?
I came out to Hollywood to make horror movies. I had no preparation. I was in my mid-30s. At that time, back then, pre-internet and everything, and if you didn't live in California, I loved movies, but it never occurred to me you could make a living making movies until I tried it. And I came out to make movies, and luckily the first one I made was Re-Animator, so I didn't lose my money. They tried to steal it from me because, when you come out to Hollywood, you're a sheep to be sheared. And that did happen to me, but I was able to salvage it through some very expensive lawyers. And hey, I was so lucky that I was able to get Stuart Gordon to direct my first movie. And that gave me a chance to kind of continue. So basically, I guess I would consider myself in the movie business as sort of certainly an independent, because that's, you're outside of the mainstream. A horror guy. I've always been a horror guy. And I've luckily been able to make a living at it. Of course, in later years, I had to get more into distribution and sales, But I guess I would say I'm a horror filmmaker.
You mentioned that they tried to steal Re-Animator. Are you able to
Well,
elaborate
they
on
took
that?
all the money, but I was
Oh,
able to get the movie back. Yeah.
Sign a shady kind of contract. Yeah, they hope you don't read it. Kind of thing.
It's
Yeah.
not well, beyond shady. They just didn't pay the money.
No.
They didn't pay the money. That's the problem. No, it's very, I mean, that's a whole, it's not the conversation anybody tuning into your podcast wants to hear, because the movie business is a business. And most people just really want to think about the fun of making a movie, or the fun of having made a movie. It's made, and you want to hear about the stories about it and everything and all that. And there is that, but if you're actually, I don't know, to me, it started with the idea of how do you actually make money doing this? When I made my first movie, I already had 2 kids.
Yeah.
I had to support them. And I financed the movie. You're out on a limb. If any of you guys have kids,
I got 4.
It's one thing
I have disposable
in your
income.
20s and you're sleeping on couches and, but it's another thing once you get to the age where you're sort of have responsibilities. And then it's really about can you do it and make a living, and what part of it can you do and make a living?
Right.
And I started at it from the business point of view, and then got attracted to the flame, like all of us moths. I always say that in my experience, the closer you get to the camera in the movie business, the less money you make. Because the people who get to you, a director will pay you to direct.
Yeah.
A writer will almost pay you to shoot a script. Anybody who gets right there where the creative part goes, that is the sweetest nectar. The guys who make the money, though, are the ones who never get close to that. Right. The ones who finance, the ones who distribute. All those distributors are also very creative and very enthusiastic. But so I guess that's one thing that's always been a part of me in the movie business. I didn't go to film school. I had no preparation. I grew up, I went to college in the late 60s. And that was the sort of the counterculture, the anti-war stuff. And so I just took Timothy Leary's advice, and I turned in and I tuned out. I tuned in and dropped out.
Right.
Turned on, tuned in, and dropped. So then I thought the revolution's coming. I went and lived out in the country where all the hippie communes were. But then the revolution never came. And so you had to somehow make a living. And you weren't prepared for anything. So I started working construction. I became a carpenter. I started making, but then eventually, and I had an art supply store. I had a sandwich shop, kind of a beer bar where you had bands. But then when I did some spec houses, but finally when I got a hold of a movie camera and found somebody to show me what to do with it, I made a short film. And because I was always a film fanatic, like probably everybody listening to this. And certainly when I grew up in the third world. I didn't even have TV when I grew up, and movies, that was it, But today you can go on YouTube and find out how to make a movie. You can make it with your iPhone. I mean, you don't need any professionals around.
It's a double-edged sword, though. Like, that's what I've always said. It's a double-edged sword.
You don't have anybody keeping you in line. And plus, It is. I mean, and it's so democratic now that the competition is crazy.
Yeah.
It used to be if you make a movie, you were already in kind of a special place. Mm-hmm. But when I made a movie, when I made Re-Animator, Stuart Gordon and myself and very few others on that production weren't professional movie makers. Now, Stuart was a professional director. He had been directing for 12 years. He was he was the creative director of the Organic Theater in Chicago. He had been doing that his whole life. He was a professional. He just never made a movie. Now, me, I was just a guy who borrowed a lot of money and wanted to make a movie.
Speaking of that,
everybody else were professionals, and they made it a professional production. Yeah. I was not so stupid as to not listen to my betters at that time.
Did you have a desire to direct initially, or did you come into the producing end? Was that your choice? I
didn't really know what that meant. You know, when I got a movie camera, I got a Bolex, a 60 millimeter Bolex news camera, wind up. It gave you 100 feet of film, and it had 3 lenses. And in the 60s and 70s, it was a news camera. This is what all the news. This is before cable. Okay, you've got to go way back. The news, if the TV news, the local news, when they went on location to shoot like a fire or God knows what, the politician, the camera didn't have any sound, of course. You had to wind it up. It was a Bolex 16 millimeter. It was a news camera, and then they'd have to quickly develop it, and they would have to have a sound person there to make, if they wanted any sound, and they would edit it to put it on the 6 o'clock news. When in the mid 70s, videotape, that they developed 3/4-inch videotape. This is like totally obscure stuff for you.
No, I love this stuff. Yes, seriously, John. Here's the thing, John and I love this stuff.
But 3/4-inch video was in a cassette. Before that, in the 60s, videotape was 1-inch or 2-inch quad, and there were these huge cameras on a stage. You know, the big thing was it could record video. In the 50s, when they did TV shows, they didn't have videotape. They could transmit it, but they couldn't collect it. So what they would do is have a TV monitor in the studio, and they would put a 60 millimeter camera recording it, and that's called a kinescope.
Yep.
For the geeks and the nerds amongst your audience. So this 3/4-inch video camera became the bomb. It was like you could run out and shoot. You didn't have to go to the lab. You just run to the studio, they'd edit it, and it'd be on the news. So they dumped all the 60 millimeter Bolex cameras, and I got one. And so I started fooling around with it because I also did photography, and I had a dark room. And I'd make my own prints and stuff. So then once I started, at that time I lived in the country on a river, and I had a herd of goats, and I'd start shooting my animals and I'd play it. I had a little projector. And it looked like Bergman to me, because I grew up in the 60s when it was all the Nouvelle Vague, it was Fellini and Bergman and Truffaut and all. That was the thing in the 60s. Art films were a real popular genre. Yeah. And so then I thought, wow, I want to make a movie. But of course, the kind of movie I want to make is a William Castle or a Roger Corman Poe movie. Because that's what I love,
Or
So,
Lovecraft. Or
yeah, and
Lovecraft.
so then I eventually ended up in Hollywood because I couldn't do it in North Carolina where I was living at that time. And I actually put an ad in Variety, which is it's one of the trade newspapers in Hollywood. It doesn't matter anymore, but back then it was the Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, and Variety had a weekly Variety you could buy anywhere in the country. So I put an ad in Weekly Variety. It was just a little 1-inch ad that said, "Horror movie director wanted." And this is before fax machines. I got 400 replies.
Well, speaking about the industry,
Most of them from LA or New York. Almost nowhere else. But of course,
because those were their hubs. That's where their hubs were.
Everywhere.
Because that's where the hubs were, obviously.
Well, that was where the business was.
Yeah.
And because there was no internet, which is hard for us to imagine today. And what I found, and when I went out to LA to meet a lot of people, some of the people that contact me, the people I tried to meet around where I was that had some connection with movies would say, "Oh, Hollywood, hookers and thieves, hookers and thieves." But when I came out to LA, I felt like I was going to summer camp. Everybody here was like me. Everybody around the country. So back then, if you were interested in making movies, you were in your 20s or something, you couldn't do it unless you went to LA.
Right.
That's where you had to go. If you're going to make a car, you went to Detroit. If you want to do fashion, you go to Milan, Italy. You went where it was. And so then I was like, wow, this is where the people like me are. Today that's not necessary. Today you can do it anywhere, because you can connect online and you can do it without any professionals involved. And that is it's a mixed blessing, because sometimes it's better to have people who know what they're doing.
Well, speaking of the industry, with horror movies, as much as we love them, it's easy to get in the industry through horror. Now, you had mentioned that you've always been a fan of the medium. Was it a matter of that it was easier to get a horror film produced on an independent new outlet, or was it for the love of the genre, or was it a little bit of both?
Well, there was no outlet. I came out to LA in '84 and made Re-Animator at the end of the year. There was no outlet for it. The only outlet I had is I had come out here before, and I had a guy who showed me around, a guy named Bob Greenberg, and he'd gone to USC with John Carpenter and Cameron and the Brian De Palma, all those guys, Spielberg, and they were all at USC. There were no real film schools in the country then. There was NYU, there was UCLA and USC. Colleges they had radio, television, and motion picture departments. Imagine, I want to go into radio, right? But that was the generation, on the West Coast, and I guess Columbia too, NYU had Scorsese, and that was a generation that kind of created the I guess what we would consider sort of the modern,
How do you say modern auteur?
Movies. I mean, from my point of view, from horror, I maintain that Night of the Living Dead is the movie that begins the modern day of horror.
Bingo.
The modern horror starts with Night of the Living Dead. And I'm a horror fan. I go to, with movies, you can go down to the first movies. You can watch the earliest stuff. And I think that's the one that really changed things. That's a generational shift. I mean, we're into a totally different generation now, but that really, really changed things. But George Romero, from your town, man, Johnny.
Oh, yeah.
You know, George Romero was working for a kind of a TV station or something.
Industrial
And
films,
they
Doing
wanted-
industrial films.
And they wanted to make, they might have used a Bolex. I don't know. This is the story I heard, you know. And I did talk to George Romero about it, his movies a few times, but it's, you know, if they were just, at that time, there were no venue. It was drive-ins. All you could do is show it at drive-ins or these cheap kind of skin flick places. You know, there was no television for it. There was no cable. There was none of that stuff, no video. So that's a different time, and it does affect the movie. But I think that, you know, that's George Romero, I think, really, that was a huge hit that he unfortunately didn't properly copyright. Maybe fortunately.
I kind of am mixed on it. I'm kind of mixed on it.
When video came in,
Yeah.
Video, the big studios wouldn't put anything up on video.
Yep.
So at first it was all porn.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, video pretty much was
Porn is
pornography.
always the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and horror is like just a step above porn, generally. Today, not so much, I think, because it's so mainstream.
It's still a step above.
Porn is mainstream now.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way that my generation could have never imagined, you know. But I think that was, you know, that kind of started it. But once you get into the VHS era, everything changed. The studios, they didn't want their movies on VHS. And so everybody was buying a VHS player. They needed a movie. They went to the rental shop, which were all mom and pop stores then. Mm-hmm. And they had to buy movies. They had to get at least 1,000 movies. And so they got these independent movies. And this was all over the world. But they couldn't just sell X-rated because regular people wanted it, not just people who were looking for sex shows. At that time, Night of the Living Dead was public domain, which meant about 10 different companies put it out. Same with It's a Wonderful Life, which was not a big movie when it came out.
Right.
But it became big because it was ubiquitous at the end of the 70s and 80s. So
you also had the horror hosts at the time who were broadcasting public domain stuff. And more often than not, it was Night of the Living Dead. Why? Because it was like, this is the best that I don't have to pay for, right?
And it's a very good movie.
Yeah.
Now, with your relationship with Stuart Gordon, can you speak to how you ended up selecting him to be the director of Re-Animator, but then collaborating with him again with From Beyond and Dolls?
Well, I think it was a co-selection. He was a very successful theater director in Chicago, the Organic Theater. And he was directing when he was in fucking high school, right? And then through college, he got his first notoriety in college at Madison, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin. He and Dennis Paoli, who was one of the writers of Re-Animator, who was his lifelong friend, and they had put on a theatrical version of Peter Pan, but everybody was naked. Because this is the hippie era, right?
Yeah.
Well, they got to have the nudity in there. You know?
And so he got arrested and taken to jail, and it was in the newspaper. And my opinion is, ever since, Stuart just wanted to recapture that peak of experience that he had as a 20-year-old or whatever, right? He just kind of stuck it to the man, you know. And so he was a very, very successful theater director. This guy, Bob Greenberg, who I met, I won't go into the long story, but he kind of showed me around LA, took me to the studios, introduced me to people, took me onto movie sets and stuff when I first got interested, and put me in touch with I think the very first investment I made in movies was I put money into a documentary called the Amos and Andy, The Anatomy of a Controversy, and which was a documentary that was basically selling some public domain shows of Amos and Andy. Right. Of course, we got shut down by the NAACP. They don't think that's funny. But in any case, I ended up, when I first came out to LA with my 2 kids and my wife, my dog, one dog, yeah. I made my money by selling old public domain TV shows, and we packaged them as the golden years of television. So we sold about 400 hours of that stuff because it was public domain, because the broadcasters didn't bother renewing the copyright on all these 50s shows because they figured nobody's ever going to watch that stuff again. We sold to Nick at Night when Nickelodeon just started. You remember
Yes.
Nick at Night used to show all those 50s?
Yes.
Well, nobody ever thought anybody would want to see that stuff anymore. So that kind of kept me afloat until I got able to kind of make some movies. So Stuart, when Bob Greenberg told me I was looking for a director, and Stuart told me to go see. Bob Greenberg told me to go see Stuart because Bob was from Chicago, and on the Thanksgiving weekend of 1983, I went to Chicago with my wife, and we went to see a couple of Stuart's plays. One of them was already very successful, and the other one was a work in progress where he showed it. It's kind of a bleacher theater, and then the audience he would ask for comments. And this was like the way they developed plays, and the actors all kind of worked on I think some of these plays, all the actors got writing credit. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of, they developed it through improv. And it's not that that play was so good. It's just that I really liked how Stuart, when he talked to the audience with the notes, and all these people were subscribers to the theater and all that, they were used to this, and they were not, I'm not say they were unkind, they were honest about what they thought.
Right.
And most everybody I've ever known in my life would have gotten kind of their feathers up. They would have, kind of got resentful of the comments. Stuart never did. He just had a little pad and he would listen to what they say.
That's awesome.
Thought, boy, that's the kind of guy I want to work with.
Well, it is, because you want to have someone
who can say, hey,
exactly.
What do you think of this? And then not push back on you on it.
Well, just understand that, like, filmmaking in any sort of production, whether it be theater or doing cinema, it's a collaborative effort. Even though, you might have a director, but you also got writers, you got cinematographers.
Well, you better tell a lot of these young these auteurs out there now, because they think that anybody who tries that they're right, and if it doesn't work, everybody else, including the audience, is wrong.
Well, that's fine, because the result will be the audience will say your movie sucks ass.
Well, what it means is that unless you're independently wealthy, you're not going to make a lot of movies.
Yeah. No, I've taught film students, John has too. And honestly, that has been a conversation that has come up, is like, understand, like, this is a team sport. This isn't like one person handling everything. It works best when you've got collaborative effort involved, when you've got everyone's talents pulling together. And yeah, that does mean accepting feedback and being open to it, and not being like, how dare you question my authority? It's like, what the hell? Like, that's not filmmaking.
Yeah. So anyway, so I saw that. Stuart and I had dinner at his house, talked about movies. He had a pilot already for Re-Animator for television. I said, well, I don't know. I want to make movies, not TV. And if you want to develop to a movie, let's do that. And quite frankly, within 1 year exactly, we began shooting. But I think what I'd like to get to here is Return of the Living Dead 3 and Society, which we of course, I'm in LA, and this is just in LA, but there's a Shock-A-Go-Go thing going on, and they're going to show Return of the Living Dead 3, which is its own big conversation, and Society, which also is. And for Return of the Living Dead 3, there's going to be an Anastasia Elfman burlesque performance, in which I will have a minor part. And so I'll hope that anybody in LA will want to attend this very memorable performance.
Well, I want to ask you about Society, because that especially is one. And we'll talk about Society, and I want to talk about Return of the Living Dead 3.
Brian and I will try not to fanboy too
I will
much
try really hard not to fanboy.
Yeah.
But Society, for people who've never seen it, it is a fucking trip of a movie. So I got to ask you, like, that was I think that was the actually first movie you ended up directing.
Yeah.
Moving from producer to directing. How did you like to come up with this idea of Beverly Hills? I don't know if they're space aliens or mutants or whatever, but like that whole social construct in a body horror movie. What was kind of the process coming up with that story?
Well, I had been working with Dan O'Bannon, who directed Return of the Living Dead, amongst many other things, on a script called The Men, which was about a woman who discovers all men are aliens. And it had this really cool paranoid feeling, very Lovecraftian in the sense that Lovecraft is very much about that the world isn't as we see it. There's something going on just beyond the veil. And that's a very paranoid feeling. And that movie didn't get made, but then I decided I got a deal. I was going to direct a couple movies. I was going to direct Bride of Re-Animator second. That was my way in. And I'd do another one first in case it bombed. I could learn something and I'd still get the second chance. But a guy just approached me on the sidewalk outside my office on La Brea and gave me a script called Society. Now, it had the same paranoia as The Men, except it was a teenager in Beverly Hills who was from a really top family, and something weird was going on. Now, it really attracted me because it was like it had that paranoia feeling of something beyond the veil, And but it didn't have a fantastic element. So I had the financing to make a movie with this company, Wild Street Pictures. The company was the financing was coming from Japan back then, which almost everything was in the mid 80s. And the Japanese companies asked me if I would meet with this Japanese effects artist named Screaming Mad George.
Amazing.
And I went to meet him, and we just got along like gangbusters. It was like when I met Stuart Gordon. And we started looking at Dali things, and and I came up with the fantastic element that I want. I wanted a fantastic element. I wanted something with effects. And I thought, man, I want something like bodies melding together. And so we started coming up with images going right out of Dali paintings. And then I got him and the writers together in my living room, and we came up with the shunt. I just want to show you one thing.
Yeah.
For those only doing or listening to our audio end of this, Brian, not our Brian, but Brian has left. He's grabbing something for us to take a look at.
He's grabbing something.
So here, this is by Stephen Byro, the guy who has Unearthed Films.
Yeah.
And he made
oh my God, that's
quality
awesome.
model, which this is based on the poster. I think it's really cool.
So for our audio only,
see what he did with the base?
Yes.
He did it according to the Arrow box. They did that
that's amazing.
They did that artwork.
Oh my God.
You know?
For our audio only audience who isn't able to see this, what Brian is showing us is literally this,
that's
statuette.
this is a great
from the poster.
This is a great product. I mean, what a great sculpture, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen Byro is, he does good stuff.
So one question that I have, and it's one that I've had for a while when it refers to society. How many gallons of KY was used in the production of that film?
It's not, KY would have been way too expensive.
Yes.
That's a commercial product. No, we had methacellulose.
Okay.
So methacellulose is, as I understand it, is a plastic that is dissolvable in water. And it's slime. What we, in the 80s, the rubber guys, those effects guys that did all those Nightmare on Elm Street movies, The Thing, all that, the 80s kind of, I thought there should be a book called Invasion of the Rubber Guys, when all these heavy metal guys came to Hollywood to either be rockin' like death metal stars or make monsters for movies.
Or both.
And they were basically doing everything they could based on all these modern plastics. So if you think about the old movies, the old horror movies, the Lon Chaney and all that, they use mortician's wax to make their monsters. But as we got into the modern age, Dick Smith started using plastics or foam latex.
Yep.
And he actually trained a lot of people. He had a correspondence course.
Well, he trained Savini.
It would have been the equivalent of like a YouTube channel, and he taught a lot of the people who started doing these effects, and then they began using these modern plastics, and which I call rubber, right? Because they were kind of rubber.
Right.
And we saw them from, Tom Savini did it but from his experience in Vietnam, he kind of went full Peckinpah with it, with the big blood and the gory, kind of realistic gore.
It's more realistic than less but fantastical.
It's realistic in the way Re-Animator's realistic. Right. It's very gory. It's really graphic, but it's funhouse type of stuff.
Yes.
It's not depressing in any way. It's kind of uplifting. And but these things, we saw them with American Werewolf, The Howling, The Thing, and then especially the Nightmare on Elm Street series. For about 3 or 4 movies, they just you'd go to see Nightmare on Elm Street to see what new crazy thing they could do with using these plastics. So a lot of it's foam latex, and a lot of it is this, and the slime was something called methacellin. You could get it in a big tub, right? I'm trying to remember.
I've always wanted, like, the shunting scene alone.
Oh, we had
been like
tons of Methacel.
gallons.
Well, the terrible thing about Methacel is that you put it on you and it's slimy.
Yeah.
But when it dries, it pinches your skin.
Oh.
So the poor actors who have to have it, if you keep adding water, it keeps being slimy.
Oh.
Well, at the wrap party after the last day of shooting, luckily they didn't throw me into a tub of Methacel, but they did throw me into the swimming pool.
Well, I was gonna say, like, that would have been the thing. Like, you son of a bitch, you put all that slime shit on me.
So anyway, I've got a little bit of a surprise for you here.
A surprise?
Yeah, because, we do have this show coming on.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring a special guest here. Could you join me?
Oh, I know that laugh.
Hey!
It's our buddy.
Okay.
I was gonna come in and say brains. Here, why don't you sit this off?
No.
That's my good side. I'll sit on this
Okay,
side.
you're good side.
So for our audio only audience who doesn't know what the hell is going on, Anastasia Elfman, our friend, constant collaborator, has decided to crash the interview, which I love.
How's it going, boys?
It's good. It's good. We're talking about the wonders of methacellulose and how KY is just way too expensive.
That's for
when
P.
you're
Diddy.
doing a shunting scene.
Yeah.
But moving away from society, because I could talk about society all day, I got to talk about Return of the Living Dead 3. And the fact that, like, that movie kind of came in and, Brian, what you ended up doing was kind of changing the entire dynamics of that series, which had been established, for 1 and 2. So can you speak about kind of how your approach was to Return of the Living Dead 3? And I have one thing I want to mention. We do have a common friend in that I actually worked for Jerry Lively on a film that he shot in Pittsburgh years ago. I was a PA for the camera department and lighting and got to know him really well.
What movie was that?
He was shooting a movie called Gearheads, and he cracked me up because he would tell us as I was literally working with the key grips and everybody, and he would tell us yeah, I did all the number 3s, all the third ones in the series. Like, I did Hellraiser 3, Return of the Living Dead 3. I did all the 3s. He's like, that's what
I kind of feel that way. I've done a lot of sequels.
Yeah. And
I always liked doing sequels.
Yeah.
I know it's supposed to be kind of like a bad thing, but I love, if I like the original, I love doing the sequel.
Yeah. Yeah. But what got me with him is that man, like, I was terrified he was going to get injured because he strapped himself to the hood of a car to get the shot. And we were in a junkyard. He was shooting stuff, and he was like, I'm going to strap myself to the hood of the car to get the shot. I'm like, this man is old. He's going to die.
He was also a diver. He was a diver. He shot underwater.
Yeah.
When we shot Return of the Living Dead 3, when Julie jumps off the 7th Street Bridge?
Yeah.
He crawled right out there to shoot her.
It's insane.
He's like a madman. He should have been working for, the Aguirre Wrath of Gods, or, he's like a maniac.
Yeah. But can you speak to kind of jumping into that series on the third one and kind of applying your own sensibilities and kind of what you feel the story should have been, for the third one, and that's especially one that kind of reflects a lot of like the Gen X kind of mentality at that time?
Well, I think it is what I like. It was the second sequel to the alternate sequel to the movie that started the modern age of horror.
Yeah.
And Night of the Living Dead did have its little bits of satire, but it was a serious kind of cannibalistic movie. Return of the Living Dead, which only existed because John Russo owned the rights to the term Living Dead, and Romero had to just go with Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. So Russo he got cut out of, Dawn of the Dead because Dario Argento came in. And so he actually wrote a paperback book called Return of the Living Dead, which I have somewhere. It doesn't have anything to do with the movie. But when I got a chance to do the movie, my whole goal was to have to make it, to do both, to be kind of true to Romero and to Dan O'Bannon, because I love Return of the Living Dead. That is the movie that showed everybody how to do EC comics in the movies and not do a goddamn creep show,
Yep.
And so it wasn't really funny, but I wanted the main character to be a zombie because I thought at that time, 1991, I thought there'd been so many zombie movies, go figure, that what do you do different? I thought, but then again, I had made Bride a Re-Animator, and I was very disappointed when it was all over that I had so little confidence in the character of the bride that I only gave her 20 minutes at the end of the movie. I said, she needs her own movie. So that's what Julie became. It became the Bride of Re-Animator character as the whole movie. It's like, that's the one. I asked the people financing it, I said, well, what are the rules for this? Because the second one had characters who had already been disposed of back. It had all the actors. And I said, do I have to have all the actors from the other movie? And they said, well, no. And I said, do I have to have the characters from the other movie? No. And I said, does it have to be funny? And they said, no. And I said, well, what are the rules? What's the criteria here? You got to have the trioxin gas and you got to have brain eating.
Oh,
that was the
there
basic.
you go. Not hard at all.
Right. Yeah.
Why do you think that these movies continue to captivate new generations of horror? Why they continue to kind of, gravitate people, even people who weren't alive when those movies came out,
I think you'll have to ask Anna that. He's going to have a better.
Well, Anastasia, you could jump in. Why do you think that these movies kind of still endure?
Well, I mean, for me, I love the practical effects. I love how wild they are. Original story, tying into kind of a Romeo Juliet type of thing. I mean, it just hits all of these wonderful marks for me. And plus, I mean, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to be, murder. It's going to be great.
Well,
hey, it was great talking to you guys.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Love this. Where can people find more information about you all? And of course, Shakagogo, June 7th.
Get that plug in, girl.
Get that plug in.
Okay, here we go. So Brian Yuzna is on Facebook and Instagram. Anastasia Elfman, Facebook, Instagram, all the other things, YouTube. The Shaka Go-Go tickets are all over the place. They're online. They're at the theater on the Lumiere Theater.com. I don't know. Find us on the social medias, and that's all I'm posting about right now. So come out, support your favorite horror living legends. We've got Joe Dante as well. He's screening a few films. There's a Hellraiser or two there. It's going to be a wild horror film festival. So come on out and hang around with the cool kids, I guess, or maybe lose a brain or two. I don't know.
This is something you don't want to miss out. If you're in the area, obviously don't miss out. If you're nearby, don't miss out as well. Or if you want an opportunity to go to a once-in-a-lifetime film festival and you got the means, book those plane tickets, get your ass out there. Don't miss this. I mean, come on. You got Brian Yuzna, you got Anastasia Elfman, you got Joe Dante. What else could you fucking ask for? So don't miss this, please.
We will have links in the description.
Yeah.
We'll have links in the description.
Helen Gore.
John, where can they find you at on the internets?
Also find me at Facebook and Instagram. You can also find me at JDubs Video Nasties. Brian, if you want to follow. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, JDubs Video Nasties. I just had my video go out on so many questions on Men in Black, and I will be at a artist commune. I know it sounds like a cult, but it's actually good people. Over Memorial Day weekend, writing at least 3 or 4 scripts that I'm going to just shoot back to back to back to back to kind of get these things out a lot quicker. We're talking Pleasantville, Lost World, American Beauty on a check-in, and other things that I'll be writing to hopefully shoot as quick as possible, get back out to you, the people, as soon as possible. So check me out there.
Awesome. Of course, if you have loved this episode, do me a favor and share it with your friends, your family, whoever. And of course, if you have not done so already, you should follow us on your favorite podcast app of choice. Just go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow. Just click the buttons right there and you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, if you are watching us here on YouTube, hey, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, share the episode, because that stuff really does help us out. It spreads the word of this out to the algorithms, and it really does a lot of good for us. So with that said, we will see you next time.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you.